Um, Hello everyone, this is Jamie14 again. I'm also nicknamed Big Bean, of course, and there's been some progress made of Defenders of War the First. Obviously we're gonna have to wait for it, I think, until it turns out that I do and if I post another trailer on it to be absolutely sure. But whilst we cannot confirm this at the moment, I'm sorry to say that all the indications are that it might, well, we don't know what the chances would be yet, but don't keep asking when it's just going to come out because that'll just get you nowhere. But apart from all that, at the moment, I have decided to do a top 10 list, and today would be the list of top 10 um classes of British steam locomotives that no longer exist, that there's none that you still see. Um, okay, so number 10, the British Railways Standard Class 6 Pacifics. Now, this is unscripted, so I'm just like blithering. So, this class of locomotive was designed by Robert Riddles for British Railways. So, the Standard Class 6, otherwise known as the Clan class, was a class of 462 Pacific tender steam locomotives designed by Robert Riddles for the use by British Railways. 10 locomotives were constructed between 1951 and 1952, with a plan further 15 planned for construction. The engines were numbered 72,000 to 72,009 or 72009 or however you want to pronounce it. And unfortunately, they never live on. They were all cut up for scrap. They were not really successful. But BR Standard Class 6 number 72010 Hengist is a steam locomotive which is under construction as a new build project. The design is based on the mixed traffic BR Standard 6 Clan class, none of which were preserved. The project is akin to the construction of 60163 Tornado and number 2007 Prince of Wales, which is a P2 that they are reconstructing as well, and the P2s are on the list too. The project maintains a build diary showing monthly progress of the build, which has been ongoing since 2010. Number 9. Number 9, the London and North Eastern Railway B17s. The London and North Eastern Railway LNER Class B17, also known as Sangramam or Footballer class, was a class of 460 steam locomotive designed by Nigel Gresley for hauling passenger services on the Great Eastern Main Line. In total, 73 were built. The rolling chassis build as started. The horn blocks have been cast by William Cook Cast Products, and much progress has been made on the design of some more components. Seen construction progress. The winding up of number 61662 Manchester Unit Project sees their LNER tender donated to 61673 Spirit of Sandringham, detailing in last news. We are delighted to announce that new build 61673 Spirit of Sandringham has been relocated to the Sheffield-based engineering company, CLT for short, Seal Limited, where construction of 61673, which will continue in their Works CTL Seal is also the home of the clan project Hengest. The full announcement is in construction progress. But sadly, in real life, all members of the class were scrapped and they're all forgotten now. Number 8. The LMS Patriots. The Patriot class was a class of 52 express passenger steam locomotives built for the London, Midland and Scottish Railway. The first locomotive of the class was built in 1930 and the last in 1934. The class was based on the chassis of the Royal Scot combined with the boiler from large Claughtons, earning them the nickname Baby Scots. A total of 18 were rebuilt, to create the LMS rebuilt Patriot class between 1946 and 1948 nationalisation. Thereafter, those not subjected to rebuilding were often referred to as the unrebuilt Patriot classes. These remaining 34 unrebuilt engines were withdrawn between 1960 and 1962. The last one that was to be produced, number 5551, it's named the Unknown Warrior now, is a replica LMS Patriot class steam locomotive which is under construction at the Mainland Railway Butterley's West Shed. The locomotive is a replica of the final Patriot class locomotive to be built, number 5551. Number 7. Another LNER locomotive on the list, the LNER P2s. The London and North Eastern Railway Class P2 was a class of 282, 2 wheels at the front, 8 driving wheels and 2 at the back. Steam locomotives designed by Sir Nigel Gresley for working heavy express trains over the harsh Edinburgh to Aberdeen line. As they were to serve on the Scottish expresses, they were given famous names from the Scottish lore. The Gresley class P2 282 Mikatos were the most powerful express passenger locomotives to operate in the UK. They were designed by Sir Nigel Gresley to haul 600-ton trains on the arduous Edinburgh to Aberdeen route. Sadly, the design was never fully developed and they were rebuilt by his successor Edward Thompson into ungainly 462s in 1943, 1944 and scrapped in 1961. In fact, before I go to the Prince of Wales, I'd just like to show you what Edward Thompson did to the class. Look at this. There is a big problem in here. Thompson placed the cylinders back behind the back bogie. That has been done the same thing on large Great Western locomotives and large LMS locomotives. You all, of course, can understand why Thompson was disliked because of what he did to the P2s, and I suppose Gresley may have been raging at it. Now let's go to Prince of Wales. As the builders of new mainline steam locomotive number 60163 Tornado, as we all know, the A1 steam locomotive trust has therefore decided to set itself a new challenge to develop, build and operate an improved Gresley P2 Mikato steam locomotive for mainline and preserved railway use. We will use the latest computer aid design and modelling techniques to release the potential of the original design and estimate that number 2007 Prince of Wales will cost around £5 million to build over a 7 to 10 year period. The fundraising for the project got off to a racing start with the launch of the Founders Club in September 2013, beating its target by over 350% by the time it closed in July 2014. As with Tornado, funds will be raised from Prince of Wales through regular appeal to the Prince of a pint of beer a week, donations from as little as £2.50 per week. In addition, specific work streams for the new locomotive will be financed through the Boiler Club to the construction of the boiler, the Makato Motion to fund forging and machining of the Heavy Motion Club, the Cylinder Tender Club recently launched to fund the construction the tender, dedicated donations to fund specific components. I don't know how you say that. And commercial sponsorship. The Founders Club to get the project to the point of assembling the frames, the Makato Club to wheel the locomotive, and the Cylinder Club to fund the design and manufacture the cylinder block, have all now closed, having reached or exceeded their targets. We have the expertise, the track recording, and a plan, but this can't happen without you. You can see full details here. Please share this with your friends. You see. Number 6. The Eleanor Hush Hush Hudson, number 10,000. Just look at that, that's so big. The experimental Grizzly W1, number 10,000, the Hush Hush, was the only 464 Hudson tender engine locomotive to run in Britain. It included a number of experimental features, including marine-type water tube boiler working at 450 pounds per square inch, although this original design usually dismissed as a failure to do the revolutionary water tube boiler number 10,000 did successfully work a number of high-profile trains. Number 10,000 was completely rebuilt as re-entered service in 1937 with a conventional boiler and A4 style, streamlining both before and after rebuilding. Number 10,000 never carried a name, although it was often referred to the Hush Hush due to the initial secrecy of the project. The W1 concept at the end of 1924, the American Locomotive Co. Alco Works at Schenectady produced the world's first mainline locomotive with a high-pressure water tube boiler. This was a 280 goods locomotive called number 1400 Horatio Allen, which was built for the Delaware, the Hudson. This used two-cylinder compound expansion and had a £350 per square inch boiler due to the similarity with the Marine, the Practice, the Sile, the Clyde shipbuilders of Yarrow, Herald Yarrow, and Co. were consulate to Alco in this project. This is how it looked like as an A4, but it was scrapped in 1967. All that's left of the Hush Hush is its front British Railways number plate. Number 5. The London, Brighton and South Coast Railway E2 Class 060 tank engines. Now, I know what you're thinking. As we all know, the E2s were quite, well, first off, these engines in real life were rubbish at pulling passenger trains. They were being built between 1913 and 1916, but they were all just kind of rubbish locomotives on British Railways, on the LB and SER, and by 1963 they were all cut up for scrap. However, I'm sure you'd be able to recognise this locomotive by its looks, and by how hundreds of people pronounce this. As thousands know, this is the class of locomotive that somehow takes the base of Thomas the Tank Engine, who was based on this class of steam locomotive. I will also note that the show has been going on for decades, even when I started growing up, and it was forbidden from me watching it because of the fact that people thought it was just a kids show because of the fact that it was CGI-ized. I also note that they've certainly done that now. So what I am going to note at the moment is what they have done, what the owner of the show, Mattel, has done to it now. A group that has been the owner of this for many years, Mattel, so determined to disappoint Thomas fans everywhere, has now resorted to a new method of ruining. They have destroyed the show in a new 2D look, and we'll point out just as quickly here, we're not going to air that today. This reboot of Thomas may be different in terms of any of the others, of how the Thomas fandom now reacts. Anyways, number 4. The London and North Eastern Railway J50 060s. The Great Northern Railway Class J23 was a class of 060 tank steam locomotive. They had long side tanks that came to the front of the smoke box, which sloped forwards to improve visibility and had a recess to cut into aid maintenance. I'll also have you know that the very first creator of Thomas, which was Wilbur Awdry, the author of the Railway series, had actually intended Thomas to be a J50, not an E2, until some time afterwards. These Gresley design locomotives became known as Ardsley tanks. The locomotives, introduced in 1913, were designed for working the steeply graded lines in the West Riding and were allocated to Ardsley, Bradford and Colby Hill. They were introduced in 1922 as the J23 class and were designed for freight and shunting duties. In 1952, 30 locomotives of the class were transferred to Hornsey and for working freight trains through to the southern region via the Metropolitan widened lines. This was unusual as the engines were not fitted with condensing apparatus, which was normally required for this line. This width of the footplate was introduced by 2 inches to make these suitable for these duties. Number 3. The turbomotive. So, number 3 is the turbomotive. And I suspect I know what you'll be thinking. This class, the name turbomotive, seems a bit, ooh, I haven't heard of that name before. I think I'd like to know about that. Well, here's some information about the class. There was only one of these ever built. The turbomotive was a modified Princess Royal class steam locomotive designed by William Stanier, inspired by the Ljungström locomotive and built by the London, Midland and Scottish Railway in 1935. It used turbines instead of cylinders, which is why we only see the connecting rods. No Walschaerts valve gear, no Crapotty valve gear, no outside motion. It was later rebuilt into a conventional locomotive, 46202 Princess Anne. And it did become a proper LMS locomotive as a 462 Pacific when it was named Princess Anne. But it didn't become a proper Princess Royal, it became a Princess Coronation, because the cylinder block was from a Coronation Pacific. Then, one day, became a very public accident. The Harrow and Willesden train crash. In that accident, the locomotive was destroyed. Shockingly, 3 trains got involved in it. 340 people were injured and taken to hospital. Tragically, 112 people died. It was then taken to Crewe Works, but it couldn't get fixed. It was totally damaged, and it was broken up for scrap. But some of the parts of the locomotive were used. Some of the parts were used for the only Standard Class A Pacific, the Duke of Gloucester, number 71,000. This was the only member of this class. Number 2, the London and North Eastern Railway D16s. A popular and successful design of 440 tender engine, the first of the Great Eastern Railway Class S46 locomotives, number 1900, Claude Hamilton left Stratford Works in March of 1900 and was at the point the largest express locomotive on the Great Eastern Railway, the GER. The design of the class is often credited to James Holden, the designer, the superintendent of the Great Eastern Railway at the time, but he was out of the country during this period, and it was actually Stratford Works chief Drodsman Frederick V. The Great Eastern Railway classes S46, D56 and H88 were 3 classes of similar 440 steam locomotive designed by James Holden and A.J. Hill for the Great Eastern Railway. They were given the nickname Claude Hamilton after the pioneer engine of the class, named after Lord Claude Hamilton, the chairman of the Great Eastern Railway. Now about the S46, D56 and H88. The GER classes S46, D56 and H88 classified classes D14, D15 and D16 by the London North Eastern Railway were three classes of similar 440 steam locomotive designed by James Holden, S46 and D56, and A.J. Hill, H88 for the Great Eastern Railway. They were given the nickname Claude Hamilton after the pioneer engine of the class, named after Lord Claude Hamilton, as we know, I repeated. 1843 to 1925, the chairman of the Great Eastern Railway, born in 1843 and died in 1925. The D56 class of 1903-1904 evolved the design to include a square-topped Belpaire firebox, which is a blocky firebox. The H88 class 1923 featured a larger superheated boiler and leading them to be known as Super Claudes. Many earlier members of the class were rebuilt during their working life. Now let's get to number one. Number one, the Great Western Railway County Class 440s 3800. The Great Western Railway County Class were a class of 440 steam locomotives for express passenger train work introduced in 1904, and a batch of 10, two more batches followed in 1906 and 1912 with minor differences. The Great Western Railway County Class was a class of 440 steam locomotives for express passenger train work introduced in 1904, and a batch of 10, two more batches followed in 1906. County 440, this was a Churchward 440 design which used as standard components from his 460 Saint class and were 300 county of Middlesex was completed in May 1904 and was followed by a further 9 that year. In 1906, a further 20 were built at Swindon. The last batch of 10 appeared in 1911 and 1912. The last batch built were fitted with superheaters and top feed. The locomotives were designed for express passenger work. The design viewers on the success of the GWR of the class vary. They were considered to be rough riders. They were effective locomotives and completed high mileages in their short lives. 38-36 county of Harwich accumulated 1,044,235 miles by the time of its withdrawal from service after a service of less than 30 years. They were all withdrawn by the 30s. So this is my top 10 extinct British steam locomotives that are on the list. They are still around in model form. So I'll see you in another video. And of course, I repeat, as for 2021, well, as I mentioned in this, let's hope Thomas escapes this reboot to keep the world healed with it. Goodbye. Thanks for watching.